Admiral Kethvar stood before the Council of Admirals in the Great Crystal Chamber on Zephyr Prime. The other military leaders sat in their traditional positions, their scaled faces showing various degrees of concern and disbelief. The holographic reports floating between them told a story that none of them wanted to believe. 17 bases destroyed, Admiral Silva said, her voice tight with anger. 43 ships lost. Supply lines disrupted across 6 sectors. How is this possible? Kethvar's mandibles clicked nervously as he reviewed the data again. The humans are not fighting like any species we have encountered before. When we attack their ships, they do not retreat when damaged. They continue to fight until they are completely destroyed. All species say that, interrupted Admiral Morthak. Every primitive race claims they will fight to the death. But when they see their ships burning and their crews dying, they surrender like all the rest. Not the humans, Kethvar replied, firmly. I have seen their vessels continue firing with half their hull torn away. I watched a human destroyer ram one of our cruisers rather than surrender. Their crews do not abandon ship when damaged. They repair what they can and keep fighting. Admiral. Veltor leaned forward in his chair. You are describing insanity, not military tactics. No rational commander would sacrifice his ship when retreat is possible. That is exactly my point, Kethvar said. Human military doctrine appears to be based on the assumption that retreat is not possible. They fight every battle as if it is their last stand. The chamber fell silent as the admirals considered this information. In their thousands of years of expansion, the Dominion had never encountered a species that refused to acknowledge defeat. Even the most stubborn enemies eventually surrendered when faced with overwhelming force. Emperor Zethkol's image appeared on the main display screen, his golden scales glinting in the light of his throne room. The absolute ruler of the Dominion looked tired, his 4 eyes showing the strain of recent events. Admirals, the Emperor said, the Council of Worlds is demanding answers. How can a primitive species with inferior technology be causing such problems for our forces? Admiral Silva stood and bowed to the Emperor. Your Majesty, the humans appear to have numerical superiority in their local region. But our intelligence suggests this is temporary. They are converting civilian vessels to military use and rushing partially trained crews into combat. Then we increase our commitment, the Emperor declared. How many ships do you need to end this threat? The admirals exchanged glances before Kethvar answered. Based on our current intelligence, I recommend a force of at least 500 ships, Your Majesty. The humans seem to be able to field approximately 2,000 vessels, but most are converted civilian craft with minimal combat capability. Emperor Zethkol's expression grew thoughtful. 500 ships. That would require pulling forces from 3 different sectors. Are you certain this is necessary? I am certain that underestimating these humans would be a serious mistake, Kethvar replied. They may be primitive, but they are completely unpredictable. Every tactical manual in our fleet assumes that enemies will behave rationally. The humans do not. The Emperor nodded slowly. Very well. You will have your 500 ships. But Admiral Kethvar, if you fail again, you will face the consequences of that failure personally. After the Emperor's image disappeared, the admirals began planning for what they hoped would be the final campaign against humanity. They would concentrate their forces at Proxima Centauri, the closest human colony to Zephyrian space. A decisive victory there would open the path to Earth itself. 3 weeks later, Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship as the largest Zephyrian fleet ever assembled prepared for battle. 500 warships floated in perfect formation, their crystal hulls creating a spectacular light show as they reflected the rays of nearby stars. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, we are detecting human ships approaching our position. Count shows approximately 50 vessels. Kethvar studied the display screen with satisfaction. 50 ships against 500. Even accounting. For human stubbornness, this would be a short battle. The humans had finally made the mistake he had been waiting for. They had sent too small a force against overwhelming odds. Signal the fleet, he commanded. Attack formation. We end this today. The Zephyrian ships spread out into their traditional combat pattern, energy weapons charging and shields activating. They moved with the grace and precision that had conquered half the galaxy, each vessel perfectly positioned to support its neighbors. The human ships arranged themselves very differently. Instead of trying to match the elegant Zephyrian formation, they simply formed a straight line and charged directly at the center of the enemy fleet. It looked like a desperate attempt to break through to safety, exactly the kind of panicked response the Admiral expected from an outnumbered force. "Begin firing when in range," Kethvar ordered. "Target their leading ships first." Purple energy beams reached out across space, striking the front rank of human vessels. The primitive ships absorbed the punishment, their thick armor plating, glowing white-hot under the energy assault. Several of the smaller ships exploded immediately, their crews dying in silent flashes of light, but the remaining human ships did not slow down or change course. They continued their charge directly into the heart of the Zephyrian fleet, their own weapons firing as fast as they could be loaded. The first human railgun salvo tore through the crystalline shields of 3 Zephyrian vessels. The alien ships, built for beauty and elegance, shattered under the kinetic impact like expensive artwork dropped on stone. More missiles followed, their nuclear warheads detonating against shields designed to deflect energy weapons. "Shields failing on multiple ships," reported the tactical officer. "The humans are concentrating their fire on small sections of our fleet." Kethvar watched in growing concern as his perfectly ordered battle formation began to collapse. The humans were not trying to engage his entire fleet at once. Instead, they focused their attack on one section at a time, overwhelming the defenses of individual ships before moving to the next target. A human battleship, its forward sections completely destroyed by energy fire, rammed directly into a Zephyrian cruiser. Both ships died in the collision, but the explosion took out 2 more alien vessels that were too close to avoid the debris. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we are receiving a transmission from the human flagship." The main screen showed the bridge of a human warship, smoke and sparks visible in the background. The human captain, a middle-aged woman, with gray hair and determined eyes, looked directly at Kethvar. "Admiral," she said calmly, "this is Captain Martinez of the UES Retribution. You are facing the 3rd Colonial Defense Force. We are not the main human fleet." Before Kethvar could respond, new contacts appeared on the tactical display. More human ships, hundreds of them, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system and began moving toward the battle at maximum speed. "Admiral," his tactical officer said, panic creeping into his voice. "Sensor count now shows over 800 human vessels incoming. Estimated time to engagement, 40 minutes. Kethvar stared at the display in disbelief. The humans had used 50 ships as bait, drawing his entire fleet into a trap. Even worse, the 50 ships were still fighting despite being outnumbered 10 to 1. Several human vessels continued to fire their weapons even as their hulls were torn apart by energy beams. The UES Retribution, obviously the human flagship, had lost most of her superstructure to enemy fire. Her bridge was exposed to space, and atmosphere leaked from dozens of hull breaches, but her weapons were still firing, and her engines still pushed her forward into the Zephyrian formation. "Why don't they retreat?" Kethvar asked aloud. "Their ships are dying, their crews are dying, but they keep fighting." His aide, the same young Zephyrian who had first briefed him about the humans, looked up from his station. "Admiral, I have been studying human military history. They have a saying, 'Death before dishonor.' I believe they would rather die than surrender." The Admiral watched as another human ship, completely crippled and drifting, fired its last missile at a Zephyrian destroyer. The missile struck home, and both ships disappeared in a ball of nuclear fire. Even in death, the humans were taking his ships with them. "Signal retreat," he ordered quietly. "Admiral?" his tactical officer asked. "Signal general retreat," Kethvar shouted. "All ships, withdraw to safe distance immediately." As his fleet began to pull back from the battle, the Admiral realized something that chilled him to his core. The humans were not fighting to win this battle. They were fighting to buy time for their reinforcements to arrive, and they were willing to die, every last one of them, to accomplish that goal. The survivors of the 50 human ships, less than a dozen vessels, all of them heavily damaged, did not pursue the retreating Zephyrian fleet. Instead, they held their position and waited for their reinforcements to arrive. When the main human fleet reached the battlefield, Kethvar understood that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The human ships did not celebrate their victory or mourn their dead. They simply reformed their battle lines and prepared to continue the fight. The message traveled faster than light through quantum channels to places Earth's government preferred not to think about. In the darkness between stars, where official maps marked only empty space, communities of humans had built something new and dangerous. Captain Elena Voss was drinking synthetic whiskey in her command chair when the message arrived. The bridge of the dreadnought Ragnarok was nothing like the clean, bright bridges of Earth's official navy. Here, exposed cables ran along the walls, weapon controls had been modified far beyond factory specifications, and the air recycling system gave everything a metallic taste. "Captain," called her communications officer, a thin man with scars across half his face, "we're getting a priority transmission on the old Earth frequency." Voss raised an eyebrow. She hadn't heard from Earth in 8 years, not since the military. Court had stripped her of rank and exiled her for what they called excessive use of force during the Titan mining riots. The fact that her methods had saved 3,000 civilian lives hadn't seemed to matter to the judges. "Put it through," she ordered. The message was short, encrypted with codes Voss remembered from her days as an Earth Navy officer. As she decoded it, her expression grew thoughtful, then grim, then something that might have been pleased. "Sir?" asked her second-in-command, a former Earth Marine named Torres, who had followed Voss into exile. "Earth's in trouble," Voss said simply. "The kind of trouble that makes them forget why they kicked us out in the first place." She activated the ship's intercom system. "All hands, this is the captain. We just got a call from home. Seems the government finally found a problem they can't solve with diplomacy and regulations. Anyone who wants to go back to Earth and collect on old debts, report to your stations. Anyone who doesn't, the shuttle bay is open. Not a single person left the ship." 3 sectors away, Admiral Marcus Constantine received the same message aboard. His flagship, the Nemesis. Where Voss commanded a single ship with a crew of misfits, Constantine led the Black Squadron, 12 vessels crewed by soldiers who had been officially declared dead by Earth's military. Constantine studied the message. For a long time, he was a tall man with gray hair and dead eyes, the kind of person who made even hardened criminals nervous. His exile hadn't been for excessive force. It had been for something much worse, planning to commit genocide against an entire alien species that had made the mistake of threatening human colonies. "Sir?" asked his aide, Commander Sarah Cross. She had been a promising young officer until she followed Constantine into the dark. "How long since we've seen home?" Constantine asked quietly. 15 years, sir. Not since the Proxima incident." Constantine nodded. The Proxima incident. That was what they called it when he had glassed an entire moon to make a point. The aliens had been using human colonists as slaves. Constantine had made sure they would never do it again. He had also made sure that no other alien species would try the same thing for at least a century. Earth's government had been horrified. The media had called him a monster. The military had quietly erased his existence from all official records, but the aliens had stopped taking human slaves. "Signal the squadron," Constantine ordered. "We're going home." In the Void Runner territories, Captain Lisa Jang felt her enhanced nervous system process the incoming message at superhuman speed. The modifications to her body were illegal by Earth standards, genetic alterations that let her think and react faster than any normal human. The price was that she couldn't go back to Earth. The modifications would kill her in normal gravity and atmosphere. But the message wasn't asking her to come to Earth. It was asking her to defend it. Around her, the other Void Runners received the same transmission. They were humans who had chosen to modify themselves with alien technology, pushing the boundaries of what the human body could become. Some had enhanced strength or speed. Others had built technology interfaces directly into their brains. A few had gone further, incorporating alien DNA into their genetic structure. Earth's government considered them abominations. But they were still human, and they still remembered where they came from. "What do you think?" asked Marcus Webb, whose eyes had been replaced with mechanical sensors that could see across multiple spectrums. "Do we trust them?" Zhang considered the question. Trust was a luxury they had given up when they left human space. But this wasn't about trust. This was about survival. "We don't have to trust them," she said. "We just have to keep them alive, long enough to figure out if we want to." The message reached hundreds of other groups scattered across the outer rim. Smugglers who ran goods through alien blockades. Pirates who had learned to fight dirty against species with superior technology. Former soldiers who had been dishonorably discharged for crimes they would never admit to. Scientists who conducted experiments that were banned in civilized space. All of them had one thing in common. They were human, and they had been cast out by the civilization that had given them life. But they also had something else in common. They were survivors. They had taken the worst that the galaxy could throw at them and turned it into strength. They had learned to fight in ways that civilized people found disturbing. They had pushed the boundaries of technology, morality, and sanity in the name of staying alive. Now their homeworld was calling for help. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Ships began moving through hyperspace toward Earth from dozens of different sectors. They came alone or in small groups, each following their own route, avoiding the sensors that might track large fleet movements. The ships themselves told stories of the people who flew them, modified warships with weapons, systems that violated several interstellar treaties, converted cargo haulers with armor plating welded over their original hulls, experimental vessels built with technology that shouldn't exist, powered by reactors that operated on principles Earth's physicists would have called impossible. They came with names like Blood and Thunder, Revenge, Last Resort, and No Surrender. Ships that had been built not just to fight, but to terrify anyone who saw them coming. But it wasn't just the ships that were dangerous. It was the people who flew them. Captain Elena Voss had been court-martialed for using civilian mining equipment as weapons during the Titan riots. The technique had been so effective that it had been classified as a war crime afterward. Admiral Constantine had planned to exterminate an entire alien species as a lesson to others. The only reason he hadn't carried out the plan was that Earth's government had exiled him before he could finish preparations. The Void Runners had modified themselves in ways that pushed the definition of humanity to its breaking point. Some of them were barely recognizable as human anymore. The Iron Brotherhood had taken rejected military personnel and turned them into something between soldiers and berserkers, people who fought with a combination of advanced tactics and primitive fury. All of them had been cast out by Earth's government for good reasons. All of them carried grudges against the civilization that had rejected them. And all of them were coming home. Earth's government had sent out a call for help, expecting perhaps a few dozen desperate volunteers with outdated equipment. Instead, they were about to receive something much more dangerous: the accumulated military power of everyone humanity had ever tried to forget about. The hegemony's intelligence services detected unusual movement in the Outer Rim territories. But their analysis dismissed it as routine criminal activity, the kind of meaningless chaos that always existed on the edges of civilized space. They had made a fundamental error in understanding humanity. They assumed that exile meant abandonment, that casting someone out meant they were no longer part of the group. They didn't understand that sometimes the most dangerous members of a species were the ones who had been forced to survive on their own. The Black Fleet was coming home, and it was going to teach the galaxy a lesson about what happened when you threatened the human species. With 18 hours left on the hegemony's ultimatum, space around Earth began to change. The first ships arrived without fanfare, single vessels dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, running dark to avoid detection. But as the hours passed, more and more ships appeared, until even Earth's limited sensor networks couldn't ignore what was happening. Admiral Janet Hayes stood in Earth's orbital command center, staring at displays that showed dozens of unidentified vessels moving toward their position. Each contact represented a ship that shouldn't exist according to official records. "Ma'am," reported her sensor operator, "we're detecting massive hyperspace signatures. Something big is coming in." The main display flickered, then filled with the image of a ship that made even Earth's largest dreadnoughts look small. The Ragnarok was 3 kilometers of brutal engineering, its hull painted matte black and covered with weapon systems that Hayes didn't recognize. It looked like someone had taken a military vessel and rebuilt it for the specific purpose of frightening enemies to death. "Unknown vessel. This is Earth Defense Command," Hayes transmitted. "Identify yourself." The response came immediately. Earth Defense, this is Captain Elena Voss of the Crimson Tide Fleet, responding to Protocol Erebus authorization, requesting permission to assume defensive positions. Hayes felt a chill run down her spine. She knew that name. Elena Voss had been one of Earth's most promising naval officers before her court-martial. The official records said she had used excessive force during a civilian crisis. The unofficial records told a different story, that she had saved 3,000 lives by doing things that regular military doctrine said were impossible. "Permission granted," Hayes replied. "Captain Voss, what is your fleet strength?" 17 ships, Admiral. Heavy assault configuration. We'll take point position on the enemy fleet's most likely approach vector. Before Hayes could respond, more hyperspace signatures appeared on her screens. 12 ships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls so dark they seemed to absorb light itself. These vessels had been designed not just for combat, but for psychological warfare. They looked like predators, all angles and sharp edges, with weapon ports that glowed with an ominous red light. The communication channel crackled with a voice Hayes remembered from classified briefings, deep, calm, and utterly without emotion. "Earth Defense Command, this is Admiral Marcus Constantine, commanding Black Squadron. We are assuming high-orbit patrol. Any alien vessel that moves toward Earth without authorization will be destroyed." Hayes closed her eyes for a moment. Marcus Constantine. The man Earth's government had been so eager to forget that they had declared him officially dead. The man who had planned to commit genocide as a tactical decision. Now he was here, offering to defend the homeworld that had cast him out. "Admiral Constantine," Hayes replied carefully. "Welcome home." More ships continued to arrive. The Void Runners came in vessels that seemed to shift and change as Hayes watched them, their hulls incorporating technology that made her sensors give conflicting readings. Some of the ships appeared to be phasing in and out of normal space, existing partially in dimensions that human science barely acknowledged. Captain Lisa Zhang's voice came through on a heavily encrypted channel. "Earth Defense, Void Runner Command here. We're detecting some interesting energy signatures from the alien fleet. Recommend we take up positions for harassment runs." "What kind of energy signatures?" Hayes asked. "The kind that might not react." "Well, to weapons that operate outside normal physics," Zhang replied cryptically. The Iron Brotherhood arrived last, their ships converted from civilian vessels but heavily armed and armored. These looked like someone had taken mining equipment, cargo haulers, and transport vessels, and turned them into instruments of war through sheer determination and creative welding. But it wasn't just the exiled fleets that were assembling. Earth's own navy, the official military that the hegemony had dismissed as inadequate, began taking positions alongside the Black Fleet. Admiral Hayes watched as her clean regulation warships formed up next to vessels that looked like they had been built in someone's nightmare. The contrast was striking. Earth's ships followed standard designs with smooth hulls and weapon systems that met interstellar safety regulations. The Black Fleet looked like it had been designed by people who thought safety regulations were suggestions, and interstellar law was something that happened to other people. President Martinez arrived at the command center as the last of the exile. Fleets moved into position. She looked out at the displays showing humanity's assembled forces and felt something she hadn't expected: pride. "How many ships total?" she asked Hayes. "Official Earth Navy, 200 ships. Exile fleets, approximately 400 vessels of various sizes and capabilities." Martinez nodded. "Signal the fleet. All ships, all crews. Open channel." The communication system connected her to every ship in the combined human fleet. Thousands of people, who had spent years trying to forget about each other, were suddenly sharing the same frequency. "This is President Martinez speaking to all human vessels in Earth space," she began. "I know many of you have reasons to hate our government. Some of you were exiled for crimes you committed. Others were cast out for doing necessary things that civilized people couldn't stomach. All of you have spent years surviving in the dark places where official maps show only empty space." She paused, looking at the tactical display that showed the massive alien fleet hanging over Earth like a sword. "But right now, none of that matters. Right now, we face an enemy that wants to see all of humanity kneel. They've done this to hundreds of other species. They expect us to surrender, to accept their rule, to become just another servant race in their empire." The communication channel was silent except for the background hum of ship systems and life support. "They don't understand us," Martinez continued. "They think that because we fight among ourselves, we're weak. They think that because we exile our criminals and outcasts, we've lost our most dangerous people. They're about to learn how wrong they are." On the bridge of the Ragnarok, Elena Voss smiled grimly as she listened to the president's words. Around her, her crew was running final weapons checks on systems that hadn't existed when she left Earth's service. Aboard the Nemesis, Admiral Constantine simply nodded. He had waited 15 years for the chance to show Earth what he had become, in exile. The hegemony had provided the perfect opportunity. In the Void Runner fleet, Captain Zhang felt her enhanced nervous system processing combat calculations at superhuman speed. Her ships carried weapons that operated on principles Earth's scientists would call impossible. Today, she would show the galaxy what humans could accomplish when they stopped caring about rules. The alien arbiter Zakth stood on the bridge of the hegemony flagship, studying displays that showed the human fleet. The numbers were concerning. Twice as many ships as intelligence reports had suggested. But numbers alone wouldn't save them. "Begin intimidation protocols," Zakth ordered. "Destroy one of their asteroid settlements, something uninhabited but visible. Show them the price of continued defiance." The hegemony fleet moved with the precision of a military force that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Their crystalline ships began charging weapons that could crack planets. But as they moved, something unexpected happened. The human fleet didn't retreat or scatter as conquered species usually did. Instead, they advanced. Elena Voss was the first to break formation, the Ragnarok accelerating toward the alien fleet at maximum burn. Her voice came over the fleet channel, calm and professional. "All ships, this is Crimson Tide Actual. Target the lead elements of their formation. Remember, they expect us to fight like civilized people. Let's disappoint them." Admiral Constantine's Black Squadron followed, their dark ships moving like predators scenting blood. The Void Runners phased in and out of normal space, approaching from angles that shouldn't have been possible. The Iron Brotherhood came straight ahead, their converted civilian ships broadcasting messages in a dozen alien languages, all of them. Variations of the same theme. Humanity was done talking. Earth's official navy, led by Admiral Hayes, took position in the center of the formation. For the first time in 20 years, humanity's military forces were truly united. The hegemony had expected to face a broken species begging for mercy. Instead, they were about to encounter something far more dangerous: humanity at war with itself and its enemies at the same time. The ultimatum expired at exactly 1432 Earth Standard Time. Arbiter Zakth announced this fact to the assembled human fleet with what sounded like satisfaction in its mechanical voice. "The time for submission has ended," the alien declared over open channels. "You have chosen defiance. This is unfortunate but not unexpected. We will now demonstrate the price of such foolishness." The hegemony fleet moved with practiced precision toward a small asteroid mining station at the edge of human space. The facility was automated, no lives at risk, but it was visible to Earth's sensors, a perfect target for intimidation. The aliens had done this hundreds of times before. The lead hegemony vessel, a crystalline dreadnought the size of a small city, powered up weapons that could crack moons. Energy readings spiked as the alien ship prepared to vaporize the mining station in a display of overwhelming force. That was when Captain Elena Voss opened fire. The Ragnarok had been moving on a seemingly random patrol course, positioned where any reasonable tactical analysis would consider it irrelevant to the action. But Elena Voss had spent 8 years in exile learning to fight in ways that reasonable people wouldn't consider. The weapon she fired didn't appear on any official Earth military inventory. It had been built from stolen alien technology, modified. With human engineering and powered by a reactor that operated on principles Earth's physicists would have called theoretical at best. The gravity cannon created a localized distortion in space-time, reaching out across impossible distances to grab the hegemony dreadnought and compress it into a ball of super-dense matter roughly the size of a basketball. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. One moment, there was a massive alien warship charging weapons to destroy human property. The next moment, There was empty space and a small sphere of collapsed matter that had been a ship with 3,000 alien crew members. The silence that followed lasted exactly 2.7 seconds. Then the hegemony fleet erupted into action, abandoning their intimidation display to focus on what they now realized was a genuine threat. The crystalline ships moved with deadly grace, bringing weapons to bear on the human fleet with the precision of a military force that had conquered half the galaxy. But the humans weren't fighting like any military force the aliens had encountered. Before, Elena Voss didn't retreat after her opening shot. Instead, the Ragnarok accelerated directly toward the center of the enemy formation, broadcasting warnings in a dozen alien languages that all translated to roughly the same message. Get out of our way or become part of the wreckage. The Crimson Tide fleet followed their captain's lead, 17 heavy assault ships charging into the alien formation like ancient cavalry. But these weren't the clean, disciplined tactics of Earth's official military. These were the methods of people who had learned to fight for their lives against impossible odds. The Ragnarok reached the first line of enemy ships and did something that violated every principle of space combat. It rammed a hegemony cruiser, using its reinforced hull as a kinetic weapon. The impact destroyed both ships, but not before Voss's crew had evacuated to assault shuttles that immediately began boarding actions against nearby enemy vessels. Admiral Marcus Constantine watched the Crimson Tide's attack with professional interest, before giving his own orders to Black Squadron. All ships, implement Terror Protocol 7. Make them afraid. The 12 ships of Black Squadron had been designed for psychological warfare as much as direct combat. Their hulls were painted with patterns that seemed to shift and move in ways that confused organic vision systems. Their weapon signatures were designed to sound like screaming when processed by alien audio systems. But it was their tactics that truly lived up to their reputation. The Nemesis didn't just fire weapons at enemy ships. It broadcast images directly into their communication systems. Images of what happened to species that threatened human colonies. Images of dead worlds and empty space where civilizations used to exist. Images of Admiral Constantine himself, standing over the ruins of the last alien commander foolish enough to take human slaves. The psychological impact was immediate. Several hegemony ships began withdrawing from combat, their crews apparently unable to function effectively while being shown their probable future. But the Void Runners employed tactics that were even more disturbing. Captain Lisa Zhang's enhanced nervous system let her process combat data at superhuman speeds, but it was her ship's weapons that truly defied explanation. The Void Runners had spent years experimenting with alien technology, combining systems that were never meant to work together and pushing the boundaries of physics past their breaking point. Zhang's flagship Quantum Storm didn't just fire energy, weapons. It fired weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, bypassing shields and armor by attacking targets from directions that didn't technically exist in normal space. Other Void Runner ships used weapons that caused enemy vessels to phase partially out of reality, leaving them unable to maintain cohesion as physical objects. Still others employed devices that convinced enemy ship computers that their own weapons were hostile, causing hegemony vessels to destroy themselves in confusion. The Iron Brotherhood took a more direct approach, but one that was equally effective, in its own way. Their ships were converted civilian vessels, ugly and improvised, but built by people who understood that sometimes the best weapon was the one nobody expected. Mining lasers that had been modified to cut through military armor, cargo handling systems that could grab and crush enemy fighters, transport vessels that had been turned into flying bombs, piloted by crews who considered death in battle to be the highest possible honor. Captain Sarah Roberts, leading the Iron Brotherhood contingent, broadcast a message to the alien fleet in their own language. You wanted to see humans kneel. Instead, you get to see us die. We hope the trade is acceptable. But it wasn't just the exile fleets that fought with desperate innovation. Earth's official navy, led by Admiral Janet Hayes, proved that they had learned much from 20 years of contact with alien military technology. The Earth ships fought with precision and discipline, using coordinated tactics that maximized their technological advantages. But they also fought with something the aliens hadn't expected: complete integration with the exile fleets. Earth's clean, regulation warships provided sensor data and tactical coordination to the Black Fleet's improvised weapons. Official Navy vessels served as mobile supply platforms for exile ships that had been modified beyond their original operational parameters. Regular Earth military personnel worked seamlessly with criminals and outcasts, united by something stronger than law or regulation. The battle raged for hours. The hegemony fleet had superior numbers and technology, but they were fighting an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. Human ships used their own vessels as weapons, fired exotic munitions that shouldn't have been possible, and employed tactics that bordered on mass suicide. But slowly, inevitably, the weight of numbers began to tell. The hegemony had 800 ships, each larger and more powerful than most human vessels. The aliens began to adapt to human tactics, their crystalline ships proving capable of withstanding even the most exotic weapons after they understood how they worked. The Ragnarok was gone, sacrificed in Elena Voss's opening gambit. The Iron Brotherhood had lost half their ships, their crews dying with curses and battle songs on their lips. Even the Void Runners were taking casualties as the aliens learned to counter their impossible weapons. It was then that Admiral Marcus Constantine made his final move. "All ships, this is Black Squadron Actual," he broadcast on all frequencies, his voice as calm as if he were ordering lunch. "Execute Protocol Omega. Authorization code. Remember Proxima." The surviving ships of Black Squadron suddenly broke off from the main battle and began accelerating toward the edge of the solar system. Their destination wasn't retreat, but the hyperspace jump points that would take them away from Earth entirely. Admiral Hayes watched in confusion as Constantine's ships prepared to abandon the battle. "Admiral Constantine, where are you going?" Constantine's response was barely audible over the static of damaged communication equipment. "To finish what I started 15 years ago, Admiral Hayes. The hegemony wanted to know what happens when they threaten humanity. They're about to find out." As Black Squadron disappeared into hyperspace, the remaining human and alien fleets continued their desperate battle above Earth. But the real war was about to begin in 12 different star systems, where the hegemony kept their shipyards, their manufacturing centers, and their belief that they were untouchable. Admiral Constantine had spent 15 years in exile planning for this moment. The aliens had given him the perfect excuse to implement a strategy that Earth's government had been too civilized to approve. He was going to teach the galaxy what happened when someone threatened the human species. Admiral Marcus Constantine stood on the bridge of the Nemesis as Black Squadron emerged from hyperspace in the hegemony's primary shipbuilding system. Around him, displays showed the industrial heart of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. Massive orbital platforms stretched across space like metallic cities, each one capable of producing dozens of warships simultaneously. Automated factories processed raw materials from 3 different planets, feeding construction systems that had been running continuously for centuries. The entire system hummed with the productive power of a civilization that had never known. "Serious threat. Sensor report," Constantine ordered calmly. "Minimal defensive presence, sir," replied Commander Cross from the sensor station. 3 patrol squadrons, maybe 40 ships total. They're not expecting trouble." Constantine nodded. This was exactly what he had hoped to find when he spent 15 years gathering intelligence on hegemony systems. The aliens had grown comfortable in their dominance, relying on fear and overwhelming force rather than defensive strategy. "Signal the squadron," Constantine continued. "Begin systematic destruction of all manufacturing facilities. Priority targets are the shipyards and resource processing centers. Leave the planets alone. We're not here to commit genocide. We're here to send a message." The 12 ships of Black Squadron moved with deadly precision through the system. These weren't the desperate improvised tactics used in the battle above Earth. This was military operation conducted by professionals who had spent years planning every detail. The hegemony patrol ships moved to intercept, but they were facing an enemy that had learned to fight dirty over 15 years of exile. The alien vessels followed standard tactical doctrine, assuming they were dealing with a conventional military force. They were wrong. Black Squadron didn't engage the patrol ships directly. Instead, they ignored them completely, focusing their fire on the massive industrial platforms. The alien defenders found themselves in the impossible position of trying to protect stationary targets against an enemy that refused to engage in Traditional ship-to-ship combat. The first shipyard died in a ball of plasma as concentrated fire overloaded its fusion reactors. The explosion lit up the system like a new star, and the shockwave destroyed two nearby manufacturing platforms. Commander Cross reported from her station with professional calm. "Shipyard 7 is gone, sir. Moving to next target." Constantine watched the destruction with no emotion visible on his face. "Continue the operation. Signal the other teams. Begin simultaneous strikes on all target systems." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out in 11 other star systems. Black Squadron had split into small groups before leaving Earth, each team assigned to a different target in the hegemony's industrial infrastructure. In the Arcturus system, 2 Black Squadron ships were methodically destroying mining operations that supplied raw materials for the alien fleet. In the Vega system, another team was eliminating the research facilities where new weapon technologies were developed. The strategy was simple and brutal. The hegemony ruled through overwhelming technological superiority, but that superiority depended on an industrial base that had never been seriously threatened. Constantine was changing that calculation. The aliens had built their empire on the assumption that conquered species would never be able to strike at the heart of hegemony power. They kept their manufacturing centers lightly defended because no enemy had ever been able to reach them. They hadn't counted on an enemy that was willing to split their forces and attack multiple targets simultaneously. They especially hadn't counted on an enemy led by someone who had spent 15 years planning exactly this kind of operation. Back in Earth's solar system, the battle continued to rage between the remaining human and alien fleets. Admiral Hayes watched her displays as more human ships were destroyed, their crews fighting with desperate courage against superior numbers. But something was changing in the alien fleet's behavior. Arbiter Zakth was receiving reports from across hegemony, space, and each report brought news of industrial facilities under attack by unknown human forces. "This is impossible," Zakth declared over communication channels that all human ships could hear. "You split your fleet in the face of superior force. You weakened your defenses to conduct pointless raids on empty systems." Elena Voss, commanding her second ship after the loss of the Ragnarok, responded with what sounded like dark amusement. "Empty systems? Is that what you call the places where you build your ships?" The hegemony fleet began to show signs of confusion as more reports arrived. 12 star systems, hundreds of manufacturing facilities, centuries of accumulated industrial infrastructure, all under simultaneous attack by an enemy that had somehow penetrated the deepest regions of hegemony space. Captain Lisa Zhang, her enhanced nervous system processing tactical data at superhuman speeds, detected the change in alien fleet coordination immediately. "Earth defense? This is Void Runner Command. The alien fleet is losing cohesion. Recommend we press the attack." But it was Captain Sarah Roberts of the Iron Brotherhood who delivered the killing blow to alien morale. Her ship, the converted cargo hauler Defiance, broadcast a message on all frequencies in perfect hegemony dialect. "Attention alien fleet. Your shipyards are gone. Your manufacturing centers are gone. Your research facilities are gone. In approximately 6 hours. You will receive no reinforcements, no supplies, and no new weapons. We, on the other hand, are just getting started." The message was followed by visual evidence. Sensor recordings of destroyed hegemony facilities transmitted from Black Squadron operations across the galaxy. Orbital platforms cracking apart. Manufacturing centers venting atmosphere into space. Industrial complexes that had operated for millennia reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The effect on the alien fleet was immediate and devastating. These were the ships of a military force that had never faced an enemy capable of striking at their strategic assets. The hegemony had conquered hundreds of species, but they had always done it by demonstrating overwhelming local superiority. Now they faced an enemy that was willing to accept massive casualties in order to attack the foundation of hegemony power. Itself, Arbiter Zakth found itself in a situation no hegemony commander had faced in over 1,000 years. The alien fleet still outnumbered the humans around Earth, but the strategic balance of power in the galaxy was shifting with each report of destroyed infrastructure. "Human ships," Zakth transmitted, its mechanical voice showing signs of stress. "Cease your attacks on our systems and we will negotiate new terms for your surrender." The response came from Admiral Hayes, speaking for all human forces in the system. "The time for surrender has passed, Arbiter. You wanted to see humanity kneel. Instead, you've learned what happens when you threaten our species. The battle above. Earth began to turn as the demoralized hegemony fleet found itself fighting an enemy that had somehow managed to cripple their entire civilization's war-making capacity in a single coordinated strike. Admiral Constantine's voice reached Earth through quantum communication as his forces completed their mission. Earth Command, this is Black Squadron. Primary objectives achieved. Hegemony industrial capacity reduced by approximately 70%. Recommend you inform the aliens that rebuilding will take them roughly 50 years, assuming they can maintain political stability. President Martinez, listening from Earth's command center, felt something that might have been pride mixed with horror. Admiral Constantine, what are your casualties? Acceptable, Constantine replied simply. We knew this was a one-way mission when we volunteered for exile duty, but the job is done. The hegemony will not threaten human space again for at least 2 generations. The alien fleet above Earth began to withdraw as the full scope of the disaster became clear to their leadership. The Hegemony Council had lost not just a battle, but the industrial foundation of their empire. They faced decades of rebuilding, during which time they would be vulnerable to every species they had. Oppressed over the millennia, Arbiter Zakth delivered one final message before the alien fleet retreated to whatever safe havens remained to them. This is not over, humans. The galaxy will not forget what you have done here. Admiral Hayes responded with words that would be remembered across human space for generations to come. Good. We want the galaxy to remember. We want every species out there to know that humanity does not kneel. We want them to know that when you threaten us, we don't just fight back. We make sure you can never threaten anyone again. The Hegemony fleet disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with them the wreckage of their empire and the knowledge that they had awakened something far more dangerous than they had imagined. In the aftermath, Earth's government faced a choice about what to do with the exile fleets that had saved their civilization. Most of the Black Fleet declined offers of pardons and reintegration, choosing instead to return to the Outer Rim territories where they had built their own communities. But the galaxy had changed. Word spread quickly that humanity was not just another species to be conquered or controlled. They were something new, a civilization that would unite in the face of existential threat, regardless of internal divisions.